Welcome back to another Swordmaster Publications presentation. My name is Ernie Lawrence. We're going to study Joshua chapter 9 today. It's an interesting story because it has a couple of lessons in it related to Joshua and the Israelites, but they're also good lessons for us today. They're applicable to us today, so let's get into it. Joshua chapter 9 and verse 1, "And it came to pass, when all the kings which were on this side of Jordan, in the hills and in the valleys, and in all the coast of the great sea over against Lebanon, the Hittite and the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite heard thereof, that they gathered themselves together to fight with Joshua and with Israel with one accord." And so you have in this land of promise, Joshua and the Israelites have come across the Jordan, and they have been successful against both Jericho and Ai. Even after the little hiccup with Achan and everything, taking the stuff and burying it in his tent, they come back and they have victory. And all of the people of the Promised Land, all of these wicked nations, are seeing this success. And remember, they're very fearful. They've heard what God has done, but they think that if they come together and fight as one, that they will be successful over this God that they don't really know personally. And so they come together, they conspire together, they pool their resources, they pool their armies. But Gibeon is different. And they do something, they are a little bit more strategic, they're a little bit more devious in the way that they deal with Israel, and that produces a problem for them. So verse 3, it says, "When the inhabitants of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done unto Jericho and to Ai, they did work wilily." They were wily about it. "And went and made as if they had been ambassadors, and took old sacks upon their asses, and wine bottles old and rent and bound up, and old shoes and clouded upon their feet, and old garments upon them, and all the bread of their provision was dry and moldy." So what they're doing here is they're not trying to present themselves as poor. That's not the point here. The point is they're trying to present themselves as ambassadors from a foreign nation who have traveled really far. And in this day and age, you travel by foot, or you travel by donkey or horse or whatever. And when you do that, when you travel for months and months on the road like this to get somewhere, then your stuff wears out, and your bread goes bad. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to show evidence of how far they have traveled, so that they can pretend that they aren't from the land that was promised to the Israelites, because they know the promise. They know that God has given them this land. And so they pretend to be from outside of it, but they want to present themselves and say, yeah, we're not from the promised land. We don't dwell in this region or whatever, but if you we know how powerful you are. We know how powerful your God is, and so we want to make an alliance with you. And that's what they do. That's their little trick that they pull. Okay, so verse 6, it says, "They went to Joshua into the camp of Gilgal, or at Gilgal." Now remember, Gilgal is back right at Jericho. This is where they camped right before they got to Jericho. "And said unto him and to the men of Israel, We be come from a far country. Now therefore make ye a league with us." So they wanted an alliance. "And the men of Israel said unto the Hivites," because that's where these people were from. The Hivites are part of the wicked nations. You go back up to verse 9, most of the Hivite people are part of this alliance. But the people from Gibeon, the city of Gibeon, who are Hivites, they don't tell them that. They don't say that we're right next to you. And so it says, "The men of Israel said unto the Hivites, Peradventure you dwell among us, how shall we make a league with you?" And so they're like, if you guys are from this land, we aren't allowed to make a league with you. "And they said unto Joshua, We are your servants. And Joshua said unto them, Who are you, and where do you come from? And they said unto him, From a very far country." And it's kind of like, at this point I would be getting suspicious, because they don't name the country. They just say, well, it's very far. You've never heard of it. It's really, really far off. And your servants are come because of the name of Jehovah your God. So they name Jehovah. It's very important. That's why you hear me over and over again, even though it says Lord and it does the all caps thing. I've been very meticulous about auto translating that to Jehovah, because the name of our God is very, very important in all of these contexts. And so they didn't just hear the word God, they didn't hear Elohim or anything like that. They actually heard Jehovah, Yahweh, is what it would have been in the Hebrew. And so they say, we've heard the name of your God, for we have heard the fame of him and all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites that were beyond Jordan, to Sihon, king of Heshbon, and to Og, king of Bashan, which was at Ashtaroth. So they say, hey, we've heard. We know about you guys, we know about your God, and we are submitting ourselves to you. We want an alliance. We want a covenant with you guys. And so they say in verse 11, wherefore our elders and all the inhabitants of our country, remember they're from this fake country way, way off, spake to us, saying, take victuals with you for the journey, and go to meet them, and say unto them, we are your servants. So they're submitting themselves. We are your servants is they're submitting themselves into this kind of bond-servant alliance as a vassal nation. That's what they're trying to do here. This is the whole nation is submitting itself to Israel as a vassal nation that these guys represent. Now, remember, these guys only represent Gibeon, the city-state of Gibeon. They do not represent all of the Hivites, which the rest of the Hivites are in this alliance with the other wicked nations. But these guys from Gibeon are saying, we want to make a league with you, even though they're not telling them where they're from. So we are your servants, therefore now make you a league with us. This is our bread. And here's where they present the fake evidence. This is our bread. We took hot for our provision out of our houses on the day we came forth to go unto you, but now, behold, it is dry and it is moldy. So, they lie to them. They say, we started off with hot bread. It was fresh. And this is how long we've been on the road. It's old and moldy now. And these bottles of wine which we filled were new, and behold, they're rent. And these are our garments and our shoes. They become old by reason of the very long journey. So again, it's not about them presenting themselves as poor, but them presenting themselves as having traveled very far. And now here's the lesson. Here's one of the big lessons. And the men took of their victuals. In other words, the Israelites looked at this and they saw that and they believed them. And the mistake they make is they did not ask the counsel at the mouth of Jehovah. What should they have done? All right, you guys sit right there. We're going to go ask God. And if God says it's cool, you got a deal. And if God says something else, you're in trouble. And had they gone to ask God, God would have told them, these guys are Hivites, they're from Gibeon, they're lying to you, don't make a deal with them, destroy them. Because they're liars, they're evil, they're wicked people. But they don't. And then here's the second lesson. Joshua made peace with them, made a league with them to let them live, and the princes of the congregation swear unto them. Now there's the lesson. You see, especially under the Old Testament, when people swore oaths, it was absolutely binding. And there was a real punishment that came for not holding to your oath. You go back to Leviticus and you go back to Deuteronomy and you look to where people swear these oaths and what happens when they don't hold to them. And it's not good. There is sacrifices to be made. People can be put to death. Like it's a real deal because they're swearing by God, by the name of Jehovah. And it binds them in a very real sense. Now, when you get to the New Testament, what does the New Testament actually teach? It says, don't swear. Don't swear oaths. Don't swear by heaven, for it is God's throne. Do not swear by earth, because it's his footstool. Do not swear by the hairs on your head, or by your head, because you can't even number the hairs there. Don't swear. Don't take oaths. Let your answer be yes or no. And from a pretty early age, I want to say late high school. I read those, and I believe that for us to do any kind of oath today is a violation of the New Testament. I've actually been a witness in a court case, and they did the whole put your hand on the Bible and swear that you'll tell the truth, and I can't swear. And they said, okay, well, we'll dispense to that. Do you affirm to tell the truth? Well, yeah, I'm going to tell the truth. As a teacher, I've had to sign an affidavit that says, I swear under oath that I will not cheat on this test. Well, first of all, that's stupid anyway, because if I'm going to be a cheater, me signing a piece of paper that say I'm not going to be a cheater is not going to stop me from cheating. So that's dumb. On top of that, I couldn't do it. I couldn't sign the oath. And so in every place where I've had to administer tests where an oath is required to be signed, I have to sign a different piece of paper that just says I affirm that I'm not going to cheat, which I'm giving my word. I'm saying, yes, I'm not going to cheat. That's all I'm doing. And that fulfills the legal obligation to the school district without me having to violate my conscience and do what I believe to be wrong, which is swear an oath. I don't even say the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, as a kid, I used to, but before I understood what that really meant. Now that I understand what it means, my allegiance is to God. My allegiance is to Christ, to the church. And I can't swear allegiance to a country that could potentially go down a path of darkness, because the Pledge of Allegiance isn't a conditional pledge. And if I swear my allegiance to an earthly nation like that, and it becomes corrupt, I'm caught the way that Joshua and these guys are caught. And I'm not going to do that. And so there is a very real lesson here about what it means to swear an oath. And if you have honor and you swear an oath, then you're going to have to keep it no matter what the consequences are. I teach my own children, I don't promise you anything. Why? I can't promise to play with you when I get home from work today. Why? I don't know if I'm going to make it home. I don't know if the end of time isn't going to come in the next 20 minutes. And so I don't make promises about the future. I don't swear things about the future because I don't have that kind of control over the future. That's why in the New Testament it says, you say, if the Lord wills. Lord willing. And so you acknowledge that God is the one that is in control of time itself. And making promises or swearing oaths is a very real, serious deal that it can put you in a real bind, and it can really bring you to the point of sinning for not holding up to that oath. Now, it's not as bad physically. The consequences physically under the New Testament are not as bad as they were under the Old Testament. But the spiritual consequence of not holding to your oath, it's sinful to do that. It's a form of lying. And so it's just a very powerful lesson that's being taught here, because they don't go to God and ask for help, for information, because he's omniscient, he would have known. But on top of that, they swear an oath by God. And so verse 16, this is the consequence. And it came to pass at the end of 3 days, after they had made a league with them, after they had sworn this oath, that they heard that they were their neighbors and that they dwelt among them. So the information comes, they find out that these guys were liars, that they came to them under false pretenses, they made them swear an oath. Now, I don't know the terms of the oath, but I would have at least at this point gone to ask God and say, hey, we swore an oath under false pretenses. Is our oath still binding? And at least gotten God's word on that. But we don't hear that either. But we do know that Israel is very worried about, the law of Moses says if you swear an oath, you've got to keep that oath. And so they just do it. They say, all right, we made an oath with you. There's nothing we can do. We got to keep the oath. And the oath was more important than what God said about completely cleansing the entirety of the promised land. There was a priority here between those two commands because the oath keeping was in the written law versus God kind of there talking with Joshua, telling the children of Israel, you're going to go do this, I've given you this land, that kind of thing. And so in Joshua's mind, there is a priority of that oath over God saying, go wipe them out, take them out of the land completely. And so it says, and the children of Israel journeyed and came into their cities on the third day. Now their cities were Gibeon and Sephirah and Beeroth and Kirjath Jearim. And the children of Israel did not smite them, because the princes of the congregation had sworn unto them by Jehovah God of Israel. And all the congregation murmured against the princes. I would murmur too. You made a bad deal because you didn't ask God first. I'd be pretty upset. And we have a right to be upset with our government when it does dumb stuff, which has been often for the past 200 years. But then it says, verse 19, but all the princes said unto all the congregation, we have sworn unto them by Jehovah God of Israel, now therefore we may not touch them. So they hold their oaths, and in that they are honorable, but they brought on to themselves a major problem. So they say, verse 20, this we will do to them, we will even let them live, lest wrath be upon us, because of the oath which we swear unto them. And the princes said unto them, let them live, but let them be hewers of wood and drawers of water unto all the congregation, as the princes had promised them. And so everybody gets something out of it, but it's not ideal. Number one, they have the Hivites living among them. Now they can't kill them because they swore an oath. The Hivites are there to have that corrupting pressure on them. Now, we also, if the Israelites remain faithful, the Israelites would have a reverse effect on the Hivites. But we see Israel doesn't remain faithful, and so the Hivites are going to have a corrupting influence on the Israelites. But what ends up happening is they become a vassal nation underneath the Israelites in the Promised Land, and they are bondservants for, like, all of them. The entire nation become a vassal state in the sense that they are now bondservants. And this is not slavery in the Civil War sense. These people are their own people. They have their own homes. They work for their own food. But their job, if you will, was to work and labor for the Israelite people. And they would not be allowed to raise their own army or anything along those lines. Okay? So it says, verse 22, and Joshua called for them, and he spake unto them, saying, wherefore have you beguiled us, saying, we are from very far from you, when you dwell among us. Now therefore you are cursed. So Joshua here is now kind of speaking as the mouthpiece for God, and he said, you lied to us, and you got us to swear under false pretenses. I don't see this as necessarily placing the blame, but Joshua acknowledging that they lied, they tricked, and it worked. And he says, but because you lied about it, and you tricked us and got us to swear, and we have to hold to our oaths, you are now cursed. None of you, therefore, shall be freed from being bondmen and hewers of wood and drawers of water for the house of my God. And here, the phrase house of my God obviously doesn't refer to the temple, because the temple doesn't exist yet. The house is the household, the family, the Israelite nation. And then verse 24, they answered Joshua and said, because it was certainly told your servants how that Jehovah your God commanded his servant Moses to give you all the land, and to destroy all the inhabitants of the land from before you, therefore we were sore afraid of our lives because of you, and have done this thing. So they were terrified. They admitted, we did this because our only other option was to die. And so they did the only thing they could have out of self-preservation, I guess, other than just flee, and it worked. They turned the law of Israel against the Israelites, and that's the third lesson of this chapter. Is when we bind ourselves with so many laws, like we do here in the United States, and we bind ourselves with all of these foreign entanglements and treaties and whatnot, people are going to look for loopholes and things within those laws to use against us. If we have a limited government, a small government with a limited amount of laws, there is less that people can turn that against us. And we see it every day, all the time. People using our Constitution to make other laws. People here in the United States, they use the Constitution to make other laws that ultimately restrict our freedoms. And we allow them, because of a lack of education or whatever, because we don't ask God for help, we allow those people to turn the good laws of our land, the Constitution and whatnot, against us. And they use it to destroy our nation. People on the outside do it, people on the inside do it, and here we are today. And it's because mankind does not read history. They don't see things like Joshua chapter 9 and understand the mistakes that were made here, and they allow them to happen again and again and again. And so that's where we find ourselves today in our own nation, is at the same place where people, we were scared because we knew God was going to bring you guys in. Y'all were going to destroy everyone, but we knew that if we could get you to swear an oath, you'd be bound to it, right? And this wasn't the only time. Remember back to Balaam, 22 through 24 of Numbers. Balaam's like, no, I got to prophesy, I got to do whatever God tells me, that's what I've got to do. But then in 26, Balaam has gone to the Midianites, the northern Midianites, and he says, hey, you want to get the Israelites in trouble and start losing their battles? You corrupt them. You get them to start worshiping false gods and committing adultery and all that. And God will be mad at them. And it worked. The enemies will use what you find to be virtuous against you if you let them. And that's what they did, because they didn't seek the counsel of God. They didn't meditate on it. They didn't pray about it. They didn't talk to God about it first. They just believed the guys. And humans are not trustworthy. Humans are not trustworthy. Trust is something that has really got to be earned, and it's got to be earned through evidence. And even then, it's a trust but verify system. I've had to learn that the hard way. Trusting human beings from anywhere in your life, just trusting them carte blanche, is a mistake. So anyway, they say, we were afraid in verse 24 because of all that you had done. And then he says in verse 25, and now behold, we are in your hand, as it seems good and right unto thee to do unto us, do. So they're like, we get it. You guys were coming in to wipe us out. We did the only thing we could think of. We lied to you so that you would swear not to kill us. And we get it. We are willing to be bondservants to you guys from here on out, because it saves our lives. So if that's what you got to do, that you do what you got to do. And so did he unto them, that is Joshua, and delivered them out of the hand of the children of Israel, that they slew them not. And Joshua made them that day hewers of wood and drawers of water for the congregation, that is, for the entire nation of Israel, and for the altar of Jehovah, even unto this day, in the place which he should choose. And so it's kind of a bitter end, because they end up taking in these people as a vassal nation that they should have destroyed. And you'll see later it comes back to bite them. Now, are they still getting the promised land as God had promised them? Yes. But does God make them hold to their oaths? Yes. He makes them deal with the consequences of whatever. Does that mean that God did not fulfill his promise? No, that does not mean that at all. Because those two things have to reconcile. And you'll see at the end of Joshua that God did indeed keep his promises, but Israel stumbled along the way. Even though they were faithful, this is a period of relative faithfulness where they're doing what God wants them to do. They stumble from time to time, but God picks them back up, and they go through and they do conquer the land, and they are given the land completely at the end by the time Joshua is done with. But they have some scars from it. Their sins, their missteps, they have to deal with that. So anyway, that is Joshua chapter 9. I look forward to any questions that you have. My name is Ernie Lawrence Jr., and this has been another Swordmaster Publications presentation. We'll see you next time.